Tekken is a fighting video game franchise created, developed, and published by Namco, later Bandai Namco Entertainment, beginning with the original Tekken in 1994. Just to emphasize, we're going to be talking about the original 3 for the PlayStation 1. The series has received several sequels, as well as updates and spin-off titles. Tekken was one of the first fighting games at the time to use 3D animation. The series has also been adapted into 3 films and other media. Basically, the premise of each game in the main series documents the events of the King of Iron Fist tournament hosted by the Mishima Zaibatsu Corporation. The prize is typically control of the company, which then allows the winner to host the following tournament. It's basically a pro wrestling storyline. After beating the game of each character, an ending cutscene is unlocked, and usually one of the endings from each game becomes a continuation of the story into a following installment. The story has largely revolved around the Mishima clan curse, which began narratively with Heihachi Mishima throwing his son Kazuya Mishima off from a cliff when he was 5 years old. Somewhere along the way, Vince McMahon has had inspiration from this, I'm telling you. Kazuya was nearly killed from the fall, but through the influence of the Devil Gene, he survived and swore revenge to his father by the time of the King of Iron Fist tournament. The second game and its sequel were considered breakthrough titles and among the greatest games of all time. You're fucking right, they are. The latter also became the second best-selling fighting game to date. The series itself is the best-selling fighting game franchise in history, even beating Street Fighter 2. And 4 and 5.
Disclaimer right up front.
Go for it.
Not a fighting game guy.
That's fine.
We've talked about it before.
Yep.
I sometimes get involved in the Mortal Kombat narrative when they have a reasonably crazy story. Yep. And I liked Injustice. And apart from that, the closest I come to a fighter that I play a lot is Smash.
Yeah.
So this is not my bag. Funny story is that Tekken, the original Tekken, is the first PlayStation game I ever played. It was fine, you know. Like I find myself like I know it's between that and driving simulators. Like I know these are massive communities that people get really passionate about, but I just can't.
Yeah,
do
but
it.
One of them's boring and one of them's awesome.
And they would say the same of you, my friend. Fighting games, yeah, because there's a certain amount of repetitiveness and kind of learning very specific command prompts, which never really held my interest, and the fact that, generally speaking, if someone at a party wanted to take out a fighting game, it was because they almost certainly knew that they would wipe the floor with everybody, so it was never any fun.
Hi.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's you with Mario Kart, my friend.
And Tekken.
So what I want you to do here in this feature is I want you to...
take the reins?
Well, no, it's more to educate me.
Sure.
Right?
A man throws another man off a cliff into a volcano. I mean...
Talk to me first about your affair with Tekken. Where does it begin?
Okay.
What was it apart from throwing people into volcanoes? Got its hooks in you? Mm-hmm. Talk to me.
Okay. So I had played fighting games before Tekken. This would have been 93, 94. Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat 2 were my jam. Yeah. Most days I would go round to my friend Joe Richardson. He had a copy of both games, or my childminder and her kids, and we would play Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat 2 and have a really fun time. A few years later, I was very much into my games at this point. I would get my hands on a PlayStation 1. Long story short, sometime into having my PlayStation 1, I had my Mega Drive, my Super Nintendo, my NES. Don't think there was anything else. I had all of that stolen, basically. Well, air quotes stolen, air quotes my mum probably sold them off for drug money, but that's, whatever.
So it's all just gone very dark here. Moving on to the volcanoes.
So we're all having a confessional moment here. So I ended up only having 2 games for a while. Yeah. One of them was Worms, which in itself should be a book club series when I think about it. And the other was Tekken 2. So for about, I want to say a year to 2 years, I can't remember exactly, I played a lot of Tekken 2 to the point that I can go years at a time and I can still remember a 10-hit combination for Yoshimitsu. There we go.
There you go.
I can remember the combination, can't remember his name.
For Yoshitatsu.
There you go. A Bullet Club Hunter. There were a couple of 3D fighting games at the time that had come out, because this is around the time when 3D games were becoming more apparent. The ones that I remember, there was Battle Arena Toshinden, which was kind of more weapons-based one, sorry, with the ability that you could knock your opponent out of a ring as well. I remember playing that on one of the original one of the original demo discs. Yeah. I think it might have been demo disc number 1, actually. I think it was that and Tomb Raider and Crash Bandicoot, one of the first couple. And I enjoyed it. That was about it. There was Bloody Roar, which was a fighting game where each character could turn into an animal. Literally, they had their own spirit animal. And, you know, I enjoyed the gimmick of that, but it didn't kind of grab me. I remember there was Virtua Fighter, and up until I never played 5, but I feel that the first 2 Virtua Fighters, because I remember playing my friend on his Sega Saturn time, I thought they were and they are still massively overrated. The characters control like their gravity doesn't exist. You know, you jump and you float in the air over your opponent, and they're a bit slow and a little bit unwieldy. What grabbed me about Tekken, and what kind of holds my interest, certainly over something like Street Fighter, is that the face buttons are assigned to a different limb. So you've got right limb, right leg, left leg, right arm, left arm. And then I would map the shoulder buttons accordingly to like the 2 strong attacks and the grapple attacks. Where Street Fighter and a lot of the SNK games, as far as I'm aware, are more like light attack, heavy attack, blah, blah, blah. Each of the characters felt unique. You know, Mortal Kombat certainly didn't have that because they were all kind of based off of one mechanic, and then it was just different combinations of moves and projectiles. Street Fighter 2 kind of had a little bit more where characters had their own feel. But when it came to Tekken, I really felt like I'd found the fighting game that kind of suited my style the most. It was a little bit slower and a little bit more methodical. It was the Randy Orton of fighting games, if you will. But it was responsive still. You know, Street Fighter 2 had that kind of pure arcade responsive, very, very quick sort of style. Yeah. Where Tekken, you could kind of really take your time and kind of map out how you wanted the fight to go.
Is that perhaps part of what, because I know of the big 3, Tekken is definitely the kind of the underdog, shall we say, broadly speaking, because I think Mortal Kombat is so shocking that it steals a lot of headlines, and Street Fighter seems to be the ubiquitous favorite.
I think I wouldn't say underdog. Like, you have to remember that during the time where Tekken was at its prominence, Mortal Kombat was garbage. You know, because that made the ugly transition into 3D with Mortal Kombat 4, and then was pretty much awful up until the reboot. So that was purely living on the gimmick. You know, by the time Tekken 2 and then certainly by the time Tekken 3 came around, they were up there because I felt like Street Fighter had really gone into the kind of niche fighting hardcore audience with like Street Fighter 3 Alpha and whatnot. So now I feel like Tekken actually kind of had the place in themselves. Certainly because it was kind of, for me, the mainstay, the kind of big 3D fighting game. Like there was Soul Calibur, which would come along as well. But for me, just Tekken was just the fighting game that I knew of. Part of it probably was because I was closed off and because I only had 2 games for a few years.
Yeah.
But, you know, the fact that it's the highest selling fighting game of all time, or franchise, I think that kind of speaks for itself.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of it has to do with it borders on the campiness. You know, the storyline it's pure pro wrestling, which I think I can identify with. But I feel that all the characters really have their own unique style. You know, they feel like their own individual characters with the moves and just how they control. Like, you know, Jack feels heavy and weighty. The Kuma the Bear feels really heavy and weighty. And then guys like Law Marshall are really kind of quick, snappy, and you have to kind of play a more defensive game with them. And as they would get into certainly Tekken 3, they would expand this more with like guys like Horang and Eddie Marshall, which would become, you know, Spammer's Paradise, Matthew Niner talking to you. but that tactical edge was still there. I really felt it as I'd go through kind of later increments of the series, and by the time they got to Tekken 5, where they absolutely perfected it, had the perfect roster. Like Tekken 5 is still fucking the game for me when it comes to the series. Tekken 4 was too slow and sluggish. Tekken 6 never grabbed me. Curious to see how 7 will turn out. And so, there was a number of games when it came to evenings of multiplayer festivities with me and my friends. Most of the time we'd stick to the N64 because, you could play with 4 people.
Yeah.
But when the PS2 came out, it was, off the top of my head that I remember, it was SSX and it was Tekken 5. But all of that came back to, Tekken 2, Tekken 3. I'd include Tag Tournament, but we just played the bowling game off of that because it was really fucking good. And yeah, I just felt that it had that level of control, and certainly the way you could kind of move around in the 3D space. I still think that I went back and I downloaded an emulated version of Tekken 3. I still think it holds up well. I sold my PS2, so I sold my copy of Tekken 5, but I want to grab a copy of it and see how that still holds up. But I think that probably still holds up really well, and I'm hoping that 7 kind of goes back to some of the flow and the pacing of what 5 had, because 4 was just far too slow, and 6 kind of felt like it was playing off of 4. One issue that the Tekken series has is when it tries to incorporate other modes.
Yeah,
they don't do them very well. But that's kind of something that goes along with all fighting games. Mortal Kombat tried to make a whole game based off of more of a kind of beat 'em up style type, and they were terrible. That was it something Alliance, Mortal Kombat,
Deadly Alliance,
yeah, terrible. There was also a Sub-Zero game for the N64, which was, oh man, Christ alive, that was terrible. Yeah, it has the list of characters that I not say I identify with, because there's a man that does it for the children, the orphanage, and wears a tiger mask, but represent King. Has a strong soundtrack, which is always kind of key for a fighting game. I still remember quite a bit. The intro cutscene for Tekken 2 is fucking burned into my memory because I've seen it so many times. I really like, and this is kind of the biggest problem I have with Street Fighter 5, is the story mode is just, it's free fights with a really just lazily hashed out intro and outro either side.
It's kind of like what people say about the Street Fighter 5 story mode, that it just seems to be put together as an afterthought.
That's what I was on about, the Street Fighter 5.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. But where with like each of the Tekken games, there's like a story. Jeez, kind of
3 fights.
Yeah.
Fucking hell.
Yeah, but where with
that's why when you said 3 fights, it threw me, because I was it can't be that bad.
No. The Tekken, I can't remember. I think it was somewhere between 8 to 10. And obviously the difficulty kind of really increased with each one. So it really kind of tested your skills. Although you could kind of cheat, because you could change in the options to make each fight only 30 seconds long, 1 round. Just get a couple of kicks in and defend for the rest of the way. Yeah. I kept it to unlimited time, 2 fights, 2 rounds. See who really was the best. The lack of projectiles, actually, I think, because I've been thinking for the last couple of days about what makes it tick for me. I like the fact there's no projectiles. I really like it just being a proper kind of close quarters CQC. Yep, I'm all about the CQC. I really should like Metal Gear, really.
You really should. Metal Gear.
Yeah. And I like that, they go ridiculous as well. You've got a fucking boxing kangaroo, who also skin swapped for an alligator. Heihachi is a great man. All right, he is one of the finer men in the world of video game history. There was also a tiny little dinosaur as well who'd fart. And there was Mokujin, who was a kind of wooden dummy who would, from each fight, would take the fighting ability of a different character. So it was random every time. And yeah, that's...
Character that then went on to star in the greatest wrestling match of all time.
Yes, he did.
Ken versus the Mecha Mummy and Shikara.
Mecha Mummy versus Minoru Suzuki. That happened as well. Yeah. In a river.
Great times.
Great times.
Love the graps.
And so, and yeah, like the motivation that you would play those 10 fights to get to like an ending cutscene, and there was always there was sometimes a a wink wink nudge nudge with some of them. Like if you think like the Silent Hill endings where you got the one with the dog.
Dogs are so good.
Yeah, dogs are so good. Like they would sometimes do that depending on who you was fighting with, but sometimes they would really kind of span out the story. Like you've got Nina and Anna, like their story is kind of their sibling rivalry. You got the friendly rivalry between Paul and Law. You've got just the whole fucking relationship with Heihachi, Kazuya, Jun, all of them. Like it, as I said, it is proper pro wrestling stuff. It's pure nonsense, but of the highest quality. The Tekken live action film is terrible.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that entirely.
Like, people immediately think of Street Fighter as like a really bad live action fighting film because that was like a worldwide release. I don't think.
Goddamn Raul Julia.
Oh god, I tell you what. To him, it was just a Tuesday. All right. I don't know what the worldwide release for Tekken was, but I have watched it, and it's really bad. Really, really bad. I haven't seen any of the cartoon and the animated films. I reckon they're a bit better, I'd imagine, because anime tends to do it right. That's about it. I'm looking forward to 7, as I said. I guess if I'm doing a kind of elevator pitch, I think it's one of the more tactical fighting games. You can't just go in and start mashing buttons. You'll get called out pretty quickly. I think Street Fighter does that as well, to be fair. But they're kind of approaching from different angles. One is purely 2D, one is 3D. Each character has their real kind of own unique feel to them. You'll find a character that kind of works for you. I like some of they kind of customized
that movie came out in 2009.
2009, okay.
Yeah. It was on a budget of 30 million and grossed 967,000.
Oh my god.
There you go.
Jeez. If you have a PS2, I definitely recommend picking up Tekken 5. I don't think any of them are on.
By the way, it also starred Luke Goss from Bros.
What? Okay. All right.
I'm just learning some things about this film now.
Fair enough. I know that the first 3 Tekken games were on the PS3 for the PS Network, so I'm presuming they're on PS Now. I don't reckon they're on the PS4 at all. Maybe.
I haven't seen any, to be honest.
No. But I
also starring mixed martial arts own Kung Lee.
How about that?
There you go.
Hey. I'd start, if you want to go back, start with Tekken 2. Tekken 1 is obviously, where it started, but Tekken 2 is where you kind of really refined the fighting style. And then Tekken 3 is the favourite for a lot of people, but Tekken 2 is the one that I played the most, so that's kind of the one I identify with. I think I've pretty much covered everything that needs to be said.
Well, I want to thank you, Mark, for holding my hand through this fighting game education.
We are going to sit down.
It's very much not my bag. But...
No, we're going to sit down and we're going to play through a few rounds at some point.
Okay.
All right.
I'm going to see how that fucking goes.